Okay, we're going to get started. Today is the hearing for the Joint Committee on Revenue for Wednesday, November 20, 2024. Thank you all for coming. A few housekeeping matters. We will be limiting panels to a 5-minute timing. You'll hear a ping warning, and we're going to be doing 3 minutes per speaker. I want to thank my co-chair and give him a second for introductions.
Sure. Joining us in person is Representative Turco and others on virtual joining us. And I believe others will be coming in as we continue. So, quick introduction.
Terrific. Thank you very much. We're very pleased to have number 1 on the list, Mayor Michelle Wu.
Thank you
Please.
so much, Madam Chair. Good morning to Chair Moran and Chair Cusack, Rep. Turco, and all of the other colleagues who are online who we can't see. I also want to thank the members of our Boston delegation who serve on this committee, Senator Lydia Edwards and Rep. Randy Fluker-Oakley. Today we are back again. I remember being here last time. I was actually trying to conceal being pregnant, so it was that long ago. Now I can't hide it anymore. And once again, I'm joined here by my good friend and my state representative, Rob Consalvo, who graciously sponsored both of the home rule petitions, as well as our city's chief financial officer, Ashley Grafenberger, and our commissioner of assessing, Nick Arenello. We're very thankful to all of the community members who are here as well. We are here to testify in support of House Bill 5099, an act relative to property tax classification in the city of Boston. By now, we're all familiar with the circumstances that have made it necessary for us to put forward this home rule petition to protect Boston's renters and homeowners from a dramatic increase in property taxes. Broader national economic trends, shifting work patterns, and commercial vacancies are all continuing to shape the financial environment that we are adapting to across the country and here in Boston and Massachusetts. We're continuing to address these challenges with long-term solutions, from new business recruitment and neighborhood-wide activations to incentives for residential conversions and grants for small businesses to fill up those vacancies. But the short-term threat to our residents remains. A nearly 30% increase in January bills for residential taxpayers. That would be a spike that would be devastating, not only for our residents, but for all of Boston's businesses that rely on our residents as customers, clients, and employees. We've heard from hundreds of families who showed up to share their stories, ask questions, and offer their perspective on what would be most helpful to them in this moment. We also have held dozens of meetings with state and local officials, industry leaders, and stakeholders across the business community to discuss in detail the concerns and implications of this proposal. And I'm very happy and grateful to report that this updated petition before you now reflects a consensus that we worked hard to achieve. This home rule petition is a product of a truly democratic, collaborative, community-informed process to do what's best for our city, for residents and businesses alike. If this proposal becomes law, the city would gain the ability to temporarily shift more of the property tax levy onto commercial and industrial property owners from 175% to 181.5% in fiscal year 25, then 180 in fiscal year 26, and 178 in fiscal year 2027. These are amounts that have been adjusted down through the consensus and conversations, particularly with our business community leaders. And I want to thank the 4 organizations who were leading the charge with us as we worked through all of the details: the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, NIOP, and the Mass Taxpayers Foundation. With this temporary legislative authority, we would be able to stabilize our property tax system, preserve affordability, and create a smoother, more moderate impact over time, ensuring that future bills for all taxpayers, residential and commercial, are as stable as possible compared to recent years, rather than swinging dramatically. Commercial property owners who are experiencing that significant value loss would still see their tax bills decrease, while the increase for residential taxpayers would be dampened, and overall, commercial property taxes would still go down. Our updated home rule petition also responds to the need that we heard for additional support for Boston small business owners. And thank you, because this committee several months ago also raised that and was incorporated into some of the compromise language. The city will seek appropriations up to $15 million for each of the 3 years that the shift is in effect, to offset potential negative impacts on small businesses. In order to do this effectively, the home rule petition includes an exemption from standard 30B language that would otherwise require us to put out a separate RFP for each individual small business. The updated petition also gives the city the ability to increase the personal property tax exemption threshold for small businesses from $10,000 to $30,000, which would provide relief to an additional 2,183 businesses. That is a threshold that would be permanent and adjusted even beyond the duration of the 3 years of the home rule petition, and it reflects an adjustment that's probably been needed for some time. We all know that for our city to thrive, our economy has to thrive. We need great jobs in our city. We need a healthy workforce, and we need residents to have enough money in their pockets at the end of every month to be able to go out and support our businesses and enjoy all that our city has to offer. I want to close with deep gratitude to the residents and businesses across our city who recognize that we're all working toward the same goal. They showed up, asked questions, and played an active role in helping us arrive at a smart, balanced, rigorously vetted petition that will provide the kind of stability, support, and affordability our residents and businesses need. So to Chair Moran, Chair Cusack, and members of this committee, thank you again for your continued attention to this critical issue. We humbly ask that you report this bill out favorably with the urgency required for us to take the necessary steps to protect Boston's families. In accordance with state law, tax bills are issued to property owners on January 1st, but there's a lot of work that leads up to that. And so in order for our team to use this mechanism and prepare bills for that deadline and for the DOR certification and city council approval and all those steps, we would need this law signed by the governor within the next 2 weeks. Thank you for your consideration of this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have alongside my team. But first, I'd like to pass it to Rep. Consalvo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for your work on this and for all the work you put in. Chair Moran, Chair Cusack, thank you for having this hearing, a second hearing on this, for really understanding the urgency in this issue, for taking this issue seriously, and to the committee, all of you, for the comments I've heard that has made this bill better, that has reflected changes that all of you have made comments on, both through this process and otherwise. I'm very grateful for that to my colleagues. I want to thank the business community, too, many of them who I heard from personally, both small businesses in my district as well as larger businesses in the 4 groups that the mayor mentioned as well, who reached out to me and had discussions on. And I want to thank them for their willingness to come to the table, for having a compromise that I think will make this bill better and will allow us to now move forward both in the House and hopefully the Senate and get the governor's signature. Particularly pleased that a focus on small businesses, something that is so important, that is in this compromise, and the changes that the mayor has made and as far as she has come to that piece, I think really is reflective of what we heard about making sure we're protecting all of our businesses, but particularly our small businesses who are the lifebloods of our neighborhoods and our main streets districts, and someone that I heard from who wanted to support this but also wanted to make sure their voices were heard. So we're thrilled that the changes in this bill reflect their voices. And I would just urge the committee to also report this out favorably. I can tell you as a City of Boston rep representing Hyde Park, Rosendale, Reedville, and West Roxbury, I have literally heard from hundreds of constituents, probably more on any issue that I've faced either here at the State House or as a Boston City Council for 13 years. And we did this, I remind you, in the Boston City Council in 2004, working with Mayor Menino, and I was proud to help lead that effort then and support that as a city councilor. But the calls keep coming. The concerns of the residents of my district and the residents of the city are real. They're fearful of what an impact would mean on a huge increase in their property taxes, particularly seniors. And I joke that I've heard from the 2 loudest constituents, my mother and father, who are 85 and 84, living in Hyde Park, wondering what, if this bill doesn't pass, what it means for them. So thrilled that we can be here today after this compromise. I think it shows that good government, the ability to work together, to put differences aside to get things done and to find compromise is still alive and well here in the Commonwealth, and thrilled that I could be a part of it and ask you to please support this bill favorably.
Questions from the panel? I do have a question. You mentioned Mayor Menino, and from what I understand and remember, there were many other avenues that were tried, most particularly a focus on lowering the budget, lowering expenditures. And that happened for quite a few years before the mayor took the extraordinary tact of raising taxes or, on businesses. How would you compare those times?
Yeah, I think, back in 2004, the mayor saw this as just one of those tools, like you mentioned, in addition to other things that he did, working with the city council. But nonetheless, he recognized that this was a necessary and important tool, similar to here today, and one that got broad support from the city council then, and after thoughtful debate and discussion, like now, was able to get the support of the business community and others to move that forward. So I would only just add that while I'm not on the council now, seeing particularly what the mayor has added, similar to Mayor Menino doing things to make it more receptive, the mayor adding the fund, $15 million over 3 years, I think is critical. That's a step similar that will now give small business the opportunity, should they need it, to recoup some losses. And the other changes she made that impact small businesses as well, like upping the amount to 30%, is a huge, 30,000 rather, is a huge issue, like the mayor said, should be done anyway, and that has a major impact on helping our small businesses. So I credit the administration for making those and other changes, and I also credit this committee for really being thoughtful in their responses and comments and suggestions, and that really helped shape this legislation. We wouldn't be where we are in this compromise if it wasn't for the work of the business community, the mayor's team, and all of you here today.
Madam Chair. So I will just note that in actually the initial spark for considering this several years ago came from officials within Mayor Menino's former administration who had worked on this. And my very first stint in City Hall was actually interning for the CFO's office under Menino. And so I still have some of those relationships, and obviously our team continues to have those relationships. They have helped inform and guide every step of this, this proposal as well. And we've been able to really dig in and understand why they made the decisions they did then compared to what the economic context is now. And what they've shared with us is that budget cuts, well, first, the growth was slowed then over a period of years, as you noted, and they said it had nothing to do with the particular provisions of this, using this type of tool, that there were many other factors that shaped the larger economic environment for cities in general, and the idea of job freezes or cuts was actually not related to this particular tool. Back in around that time, the state cut, made a I guess what's called 9C cuts to the local aid line item, which resulted in a cut that the city had to absorb, and this was happening across many, many cities in the Commonwealth. And so that was some of the primary driver for the times that the city of Boston has really had to slow down, is when there was an external pressure from the state in lowering their local aid. We're very grateful that even with the state's challenges, those cuts were not applied directly to cities in the local aid line item, and that has been one factor. Another factor is that there's been a market reset coming out of the pandemic in jobs and sort of the wages that are offered overall. Many, many industries had work shortages coming out of the pandemic, and we saw cities that couldn't hire enough bus drivers or lifeguards or food service workers or 911 call takers, really impacting the ability to provide basic safety and services. Many of our union contracts had to be negotiated in this period, and I think that's been true across many municipalities as well, where I came into office with every single one of our union contracts, all 48 expired, and so that had never happened before in the history of Boston. There are usually 3-4 year contracts that are kind of on a rolling basis, but because of the pandemic, everything was put aside to just focus on providing services, and the negotiations weren't happening. So we had to sort of adjust the salaries, sometimes after 4 years of not having cost of living increases for municipal workers. The police contract, for example, our officers were working for more than 4 years without cost of living through the pandemic until we settled the contract last year. So this budget, there's been a lot of attention to why we were at 7% budget growth, plus 1% for shifting the BPDA, which came with its own revenue, so it's kind of cost revenue neutral. But our 7% reflected the first time that police, fire, EMS, and many other larger contracts were fully absorbed into our budget. And it's in line with the type of growth that other cities and large agencies had to experience in making that market adjustment through the pandemic as well. So we were at 7%, the city of Brookline, I believe, was at 6%, Cambridge was at 8% increase. and the MBTA was at 11% increase, again, because, as you know very well, settling contracts to be able to recruit and retain the workforce that's needed in this moment. So it's 2004 was what we're told by the former Menino officials, the staggered, the sort of lagging impacts of the dot-com bubble burst and the economic impacts being felt a few years later at the city level, really driving the overall economy for all cities that were forming their budgets then. This is almost the opposite, where we've had, you could, by many metrics, a strong economy with unemployment down, job growth up, and therefore needing to adjust salaries up to fill those key roles that we've now been able to fully staff and provide services. And that's true across all cities in this moment too. So what they have told us is that the larger macroeconomic context is really what drove that, and that this proposal was not related to the job cuts or hiring freezes that they had to implement for other reasons.
So let me just follow up with that. So, you talk about the T, and we know that delayed maintenance issues and others on the T are really sucking funds from every one of our communities. And so why isn't this a runaway train? For example, Greg Maynard, who is here, I saw earlier, from Boston Policy Institute, really brought in his article to light the fact that his view is it's not a one-time event here that can be smoothed out with a temporary 3-year shift. I mean, which would seem to suggest that ultimately, like every single family, we all have to think about tightening our belts in one way or another, and you certainly have spoken about those efforts. But what kind of data or assurances do you have that this is something that is not going to, over long term, put a monkey wrench into the state and the governor's incredibly focused efforts on competitiveness for Massachusetts? And
by this, do you mean the legislation or the idea of downtown vacancies? Okay. So I would say that in the research we've done about all of Boston's past budgets, basically in the modern era, the city has never made a mid-year cut on our own. Again, with the exception of the state, when the state has reduced local aid, of course, that has a direct impact on the budget at that moment. But otherwise, even in the midst of the Great Recession, the dot-com bubble burst, times of true economic crisis and stress across the board, that was often reflected in the years to come, because our budgets, once they're set, are really workforce funding. And you can sort of try not to hire some of the positions that were allocated, but those have a direct impact even on the budget themselves. We went through the exercise here of if we were to cut the budget immediately by 1% at the city level, what would that involve? And it would involve things like not hiring or bringing on positions that have not yet come onto the city roles.
Hiring freeze.
For example, not bringing on the police, fire, and EMS classes, recruit classes, because you want to preserve the jobs that you have first before you go to bringing on new jobs. But in fact, we need more officers to be able to address overtime that's given out because of a shortage of staffing. And so there are lots of long-term implications on that front that we believe the investments that we're making in this budget, and most of it is non-discretionary increases, again, due to union contracts, collective bargaining agreements. There is a less than 0.5 percentage point of new investments in this budget compared to last year. So our sort of discretionary budget growth is less than 0.5%, and it's really around 3 items. It was adding 12 new EMTs, which is necessary, we believe, to address the rising call volume and to guarantee that there could be one more ambulance in the city to cover the places where those calls are coming in from. It was in updating permitting software to help business licensing, because some of it is quite archaic at this point, and we're seeing such an interest in new businesses opening up that we want that software to function and people can do things online instead of having to come in person. And then it was a small investment in affordable housing, in housing acquisition, which as we're trying to address the housing crisis, we felt was, again, a necessary investment. In the years ahead, we do not expect that the budget growth will be at the level that it was at as we were adjusting up basically every single union contract. And so there's a very tight belt around cities with Prop 2.5. We are limited 2.5% property tax increase. in the 43 years since that has been the law, that has been on average 25% below inflation every single year. And so we're always scrambling to try to find new revenue sources, and unfortunately we'll probably be back at some point in the future to talk to you all about that. But the downtown vacancy situation, we really won't know until we see how this pans out in the commercial real estate market. What we do know now is that it's isolated to a particular subsection of commercial offices. It's not affecting hotels, it's not affecting some of our Class A++ buildings. It's really about older office buildings that are seeing those smaller companies not wanting to come in person anymore, and they're really struggling. And so our efforts have been focused on how do we fill up these same buildings with more companies now. We've been dedicating resources, working alongside the chamber and real estate industry leaders to our business recruitment efforts, and the focus with the governor on climate tech and what types of industries we are pursuing. There's an opportunity there to fill up those spaces and stem that vacancy loss. There will be shifts in the market, but we did see a couple months ago the very first sign that office space was it was a net positive absorption of office space. And so more companies were either renewing their leases or choosing to move to Boston, given the rents coming down a little bit. And so we don't know for sure how this will pan out, but we are doing everything that we can to address the long-term issues while also recognizing that there is this immediate short-term need for our residents.
Two quick things on that. I think that back in 2004, when we did this on the city council and I voted for it, we recognized that it was one tool in the toolbox. So the mayor's articulated and her team several things, and you've been great and this committee to ask those questions about, well, what other things can happen to make sure that we're addressing these issues. This was used one time. It was never used again in my 9 years remaining on the city council, because it is just that. It's just one piece of that tool in the toolbox. And again, I don't recall that we voted on it again in my 9 years at Boston Used It. I left the council in 2013. But from time to time, it is needed. And I think I'm aware that at least one other time during my 4 years, 2 terms in the legislature, we've done it for another municipality, a smaller municipality who's needed a similar kind of option. So again, it's just that option. It's just that one piece. And I just wanted to also recognize the importance of something the mayor said about, as again, once a counselor, always a counselor, so throwing on my council hat of the necessary need to negotiate contracts that are critical, like police and fire and EMS. The constituents in this room who are here because they're concerned about a huge increase in property tax, at the same time still demand that the city of Boston is offering those services. I get calls for more street sweeping, more police, more patrols, another ambulance in my district, more city services, not less. And so I think it's that interesting juxtaposition that the mayor has to be able to balance the budget, tighten her purse strings, and at the same time recognize that as the city grows in population, which it's doing every day, and as we know it doubles every day in population, we have to be able to provide these services not only to the people who come and work here and visit here, but to the people who live in our neighborhoods, and they want those services and they want more. So it's just an interesting balance, and I'm appreciative that you brought that up, because that's why I think having one tool that allows us to address this is so important. Is not necessarily the only stopgap, but one piece.
Thank you. I want to recognize on team Senator Brady has a question. Senator Brady, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. And I don't want to repeat what has already been asked, but as was mentioned, when we have tough budgets, we all have to live within our means with our own home budgets. And I know when we had some difficult times that the governor has had to do 9C cuts to balance the budget with the state. And, as we all know, the governor presents a budget to us and the legislature goes to the House and Senate, then goes back to the governor. But unfortunately, she's had to do some serious 9C cuts and a measure like a hiring freeze. And I know that, some of my communities have voted down Prop 2.5 override because they're worried about the cost to the consumer and the businesses. And I've had concerns from a lot of businesses because there's been so many vacancies. And before I ask to go on, I want to congratulate you, Madam Mayor, with your new baby on the way. And
Thank you.
I've known Rep. Consalvo for many, many years, and when he was a councilor, and I respect all the work you do. And we certainly don't want to see any cuts in public safety or schools, but I do hear a lot of vacancies all over the place, and especially since COVID, less people are traveling into Boston work because they're able to work from home. So the small restaurants, I hear they're suffering because there's not enough workforce in the Boston area, so they're not going to eat out at the restaurants. And I know you did mention a little, but you've considered all measures like cutting the budget in Boston. We certainly don't want to hurt things, and if we had enough money to cover all the bases, that'd be great, but as we all know, we got to live within our means.
Thank you,
So
Senator
Mayor,
Brady.
anything you wanted to add? Anything that you've done?
Yes, thank you so much, Senator. I'll pass it to our team if Ashley and Nick want to add anything, and then I'll fill in a little more, so I'm not doing all the talking.
Thanks for the comment and question, Senator. Just to reiterate, I think some of the things that the mayor said around this budget, really seeking to kind of true up a lot of contracts, costs in our budget, as well as other revenue sources in our budget. We saw coming out of the pandemic, other revenue sources starting to grow, and so needing and wanting to reflect that, growth coming out of the pandemic as well. I think what's really important to note here is Boston has never, and nor are we proposing through this, seeking a Prop 2.5 override. We are proposing to live within the limits of that law. And so we are just seeking really not to solve a revenue problem, but an allocation problem that is happening in this moment as a result of changing work patterns and commercial valuations. So I think we view this as a temporary measure to kind of get us to what will probably be our new normal, but having that happen over a longer period of time as opposed to having that transition happen all in 1 year.
And if I may, where was the votes on the city council in Boston? I don't need to know the individuals, but what was the ratio, who was in support of this and who was not?
It was a 12-to-1 vote
Thank you.
to advance this. Thank you, Senator. And I will just add, I think your point is exactly right, that what we're worried about is finding the right balance so that we're not hurting the business community even, in a time when they're already struggling, and particularly those small businesses that have seen changes because of people, zooming into work and businesses not taking up their leases. We are seeing some encouraging signs. The downtown bid, for example, our business improvement district, they track foot traffic very, very carefully, and they track vacancies very carefully as well. They have seen foot traffic going up on a steady basis, and they have seen vacancies going down on a steady basis. I wish I had the statistics on me right now. I can send it as a follow-up to the committee on sort of tracking where we are relative to pre-pandemic. But we know that this is something that's going to take longer than 3 years to address, and this isn't the tool to address it either. So we used a good chunk of our federal recovery dollars, our ARPA dollars, to focus on filling up vacancies downtown and in different commercial districts. Just earlier in the week, we announced the last bit of using up those dollars. So 90 new small businesses received funding to actually have move-in costs so that they can directly open back up. And that's been a huge driver of how we get foot traffic back. We also have been working with the business organizations who have shown that there is appetite if we can do the recruitment right, and we can find companies who are actually looking to move into Boston, whether it's Lego or Car Gurus or some of the big ribbon cuttings we've had in the Seaport with life sciences companies. Boston is still seen as a place where people want to be. I think getting the MBTA to be reliable, they should have general managers doing an excellent job with the governor, and they'll have no more slow zones on the subway system by the end of this calendar year. I think once we see commuter rail also staffed back up, that will provide the reliability for people to try to come back in person as well. And I'll just share a little bit of data from our largest commercial property owner in Boston. Boston Properties has graciously shared some of their numbers because they can track this better than anyone else. They're not tracking just one company. They own the whole office tower, and they can track by when employees are tapping in their IDs to get into the elevator system. And they said that basically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is back at 95% of pre-pandemic in-person work for those particular big office buildings in Boston. Mondays are closer to 60-some%, and Fridays are at 30% of what the pre-pandemic was. And so different companies are making different decisions, but if your workforce is still coming in person Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or even Monday through Thursday at high numbers, I think we're seeing some of them choose to renew their leases or even expand in some cases, like Bain Capital did. Again, it is the smaller buildings that are really struggling, and it's a different kind of business that's in those. It's not the large finance or private equity businesses. It's the sort of smaller companies, and we're working with them when it makes sense. We try to help them convert that building into apartments. There are now more than 500 units of housing that are being created from formerly vacant office buildings downtown through our tax incentive program. And I hear every day from new buildings that are trying to opt into that as well. Thank you to the legislature, because the state also threw in $15 million and more in the housing bond bill to be able to supplement those, offset those costs to convert those empty buildings and put them to good use as housing. And then we're just trying to activate every possible place that we can. So we're working to live within our means. I think you'll see that reflected in this next budget cycle at the city when we don't have all the union contracts re-upping at the same time. And we hope, the message was things that we can control. Basically, we were within 0.5 percentage point of last year's budget, and they were on things that really felt necessary, like public safety and EMS and improving business technology programs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to welcome Rep. Linsky. Any questions?
I'm fine, thank you. Just one question, if we could. You talked about Class A office spaces doing, sort of has weathered the storm pretty well. Do you track, and I know there's a residential and commercial rate, but do you track what's happened to the non-Class A commercial in terms of how much of a drop in value they've had versus the Class A? And just, what is the distinction, what is the difference you're seeing? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Rep. Turco. So we do track that. It's really challenging to we have such a different mix of properties within the city that, and our city is so unique from building to building. It's not a very cookie cutter city, and so you end up with lots of values for properties changing neighborhood to neighborhood and block to block. And so, when we're setting values and we're setting assessments, we have to create categories because we're not doing individual appraisals. And so in those categories, based on the economic circumstances that we've been seeing, we're seeing Class A properties are stable to down a little bit in value. And Class B and C, largely due to vacancy levels, but also due to things like interest rate pressure and availability of capital, they're down. Vacancy level is, in the 15 to 20% range, considering what numbers you're looking at and what neighborhoods. And that can be a little higher for that Class B and C space. And then, so the impact on that can have a corresponding impact on values, right? I think that the important thing to remember when we're talking about the piece of legislation that we're talking about is that it is not a catch-all solution to solve all of the city's problems with the economy. It's really an attempt to address a very, very specific problem, which is an allocation problem, and it's not a revenue problem, right? So the allocation problem that we're concerned about, so basically, to the extent that a visual is helpful, this has been our tax levy over time. So the top line is what commercial property has been responsible for in terms of city taxes. And then the blue line is what residential property has been responsible for, as a whole. What we are worried about happening is basically this. So let's say this is the residential levy, right? And this is
demonstrative.
This is what's been happening over time. And this is what's been happening over time with the commercial levy, right? So it's been gradually going down. Residential has been gradually going up. What we're worried about is that in this 1 year, all of a sudden the residential responsibility is going to spike if we do nothing and we don't get this bill passed. And then at the same time, the commercial responsibility for the levy will correspondingly drop dramatically. And what our bill does and what our goal is to keep it steady. And that's really the problem we're trying to solve, is that problem of balance. And that's what our bill does, and especially with the compromise that we reached with the business community and the excellent work that the mayor has done, we really think that this achieves that.
And see how we are living within our means on the budget? Instead of fancy props, we are saving money using every paperclip.
I want to see if you put it back in together and reuse it, then I'd be impressed. Thank you.
Anyone else? I want to thank you all for coming, of course, and for answering questions and clarifying many things. Most appreciated. Thank you very much. Next, we have Rep. DeCoste. Thank you, sir.
Chair Moran, Chair Cusick, members of the committee, and also members online. I'll be brief. We are here to testify for House Bill 5099. I am hosting a panel that has some severe concerns about what that legislation might do to their businesses within Boston, and I will turn it over to Mr. Pincus here, and also I think Mr. Chasaveri, Mr. Lehman, and perhaps several others have joined us on this panel. Thank you.
Great.
And
So
they understand it's only 5 minutes total.
Thank you.
So just quickly, from Shlomo Pincus, member of SPOA, and we heard from the previous council that they talked about compromise, they talked about balance, and that they talked about this not being a Prop 2.5 override. This is a Prop 2.5 override. They will be back in a few years for another one, because if they could pay the employees of the city of Boston double the CPI inflation rate, next time they'll pay triple the CPI rate of what it will be in a few years. So you're opening the barn door on that one. The other item was the assessor. He talked about balance with his prop. There is no balance here. The appellate tax board is about to come down on the city of Boston on values, not the assessed rate for commercial rates, but the values of the buildings, and on maybe the non-A properties, they will drop by more than half. Not 15 or 20% like he said, but in a year or two, we'll find out, because the values are dropping already. They've dropped this past year, and the assessor must drop his commercial rates on commercial properties by at least half.
I don't know if any of the other individuals online have anything to add, but I appreciate you keeping that well under 5 minutes, and I have nothing more, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone raising their hand or waiting to speak
yes.
on this panel? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for giving us this time. I'd like to focus in particular on the analogy with Menino's similar proposal in 2004, which I think is misguided for a few reasons. First, back then, property taxes only made up 54% of the city's budget, which was still high relative to the norm for other metro areas, but had significantly more room to grow than the 71% we have today. That reclassification also took place in an environment of fiscal discipline, as has been mentioned already. The city's nominal spending increased by 3.8% in fiscal year 02, 2.8% in fiscal year 03, and only 1.5% in fiscal year 04, which was actually a budget cut in inflation-adjusted terms. The full-time headcount for the city employees also decreased by 8.7% during this period. Property owners could therefore be persuaded that the tax increase was necessary to maintain the baseline functioning of city government and not merely a way to sustain profligate spending growth. Contrast this with the situation today. The proposed fiscal year 25 budget increases spending by 8% over the previous year, or 7% given the BPDA adjustment, after a decade that has seen spending increase by 54.8% and full-time employee headcount increase by 7.6%. These increases exceed inflation by far, and which has only been 2.2% over the past year. The city's spending increase is especially notable given that its population has actually declined in recent years. And the Massachusetts state budget increased by only 2.7% this year, a modest gain relative to inflation. So given this fiscal environment, I think it's both practically and morally misguided to try to attempt to raise taxes on the commercial property base in the city. It flies in the face of basic economic logic and the moral justification for taxation. I'll yield to anyone else who wants to talk.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else
my name-
on Teams? Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Paul Jenny, and I run a tech company, and I was looking through Mayor Wu's budget, and I noticed that rather than cutting spending dramatically across the board to try and balance the budget, they keep increasing things. A 19% increase in the technology budget, or $9 million for people to work from home. Frankly, my company's gone to virtual. We don't plan to return to the office, and we don't have a work from home budget. We figured out how to cut costs and work that way. My girlfriend similarly works at Pfizer. She works from home. There's no work from home budget. If they're going to have employees not come to the office, they should figure out a way to make sure they can use already owned city computers, already owned technology, and not raise taxpayer dollars to do this. And if people aren't coming to work anyways, well, that's costing City of Boston small businesses, local restaurants, and local other establishments additional revenue. So it's just not helping.
Thank you.
We need to learn within the budget.
Thank you. Anyone else on this panel? Thank you, Rep.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We're out of time. I assume these comments have already been forwarded.
Right, and I know we always have the option of presenting them in writing to the committee.
Immediately.
Immediately.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Rep. Rob.
Madam Chair, thank you for taking us out of turn also.
You're quite welcome. Appreciate your testimony. Next, Rep. Rob Consalvo. Sorry, you're all, sorry about that, still there. Ashley, they were on the phone. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping ahead here finally. Enrique Pepin. Not here, we'll wait. Lou Murray. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Great.
Madam Chairwoman. My name is Lou Murray. I am chairperson, was immediate past chairperson of Boston Catholic Radio. We had a storefront in Boston. Because of the rent increases after COVID, we gave up that studio, it's a mobile studio. And I submit that the testimony you just heard from Mayor Wu's panel is a case of a fairy tale. There is no way that we can tax our way out of the collapse of commercial real estate in the United States. And when you have 70% of your A buildings empty on a Friday, that's 70% less people going to our restaurants, our bars, on a big night, on Friday night. I have another fairy tale that I'd like to tell you. It's called Mayor Wu wants to spin straw and make it into gold with a tax increase. We just heard this great panel before me. That's Rumpelstiltskin. I believe that she is actually killing the goose that laid the golden egg. This is the state capitol. You are state representatives and senators. You must hold the city accountable and have more budget cuts. That's what every family is doing. Let me tell you what's happening to small businesses. This is yesterday's data from the National Institute of National Federation of Small Businesses. 20% of U.S. small businesses over the last 3 months had the worst reading since 2001 and 1991 recessions. 29th consecutive month of declining sales. The longest streak since the 2008 financial crisis. Small businesses cite inflation and labor market as the problems. If you increase these taxes, everybody that lives in the city is going to see increases on the birthday cakes they buy for their kids, increases on the donuts that they get as a treat after Mass, increases on the pizza slices that they stop off for as a quick lunch, and the milk that they buy for their children. I also want to just make one point. that the voice of the small business community has been muted by Mayor Menino. He was referenced here as some kind of demigod. We had boards of trade all over the city. They were independent organizations. The Obama administration launched the Main Street program. You're never going to have small businesses speak out against the mayor who controls the Main Street programs, and in order to get a federal grant to redo the signage on your business, you've got to be in good favor. So this idea that small businesses are in favor of more taxes is wrong. This idea that homeowners are in favor of shifting the tax to the landlords. These are our neighbors that own businesses, that struggle to keep them going, that employ our kids and our families. So I urge you to table this motion or defeat it outright. The city of Boston must become the hub of the state again. And letting the mayor run wild with more taxes, that's not going to happen. And I'm ashamed that she pinned this on police and fire and ambulances. No, the blame belongs on a city government completely out of control.
Thank you. Let me just be sure there are no questions. I'm sorry if I
I have
missed.
one question, if I could.
Yes.
You know, the last panel, the first panel said, and I heard it at the last hearing when we looked at the first iteration of this bill, that commercial tax bills will go down whether we pass this bill or not. If we pass this bill, they'll go down less than they would otherwise have gone. Do you dispute that?
I do not dispute that, but I would like to point to what's happening in the country. A 403,000 square foot office complex in another B city, Rochester, New York, sold for $1 million in an online auction about 4 weeks ago. Mind-blowing. The landmark One Charles Center, the premier building in downtown Baltimore, again, another comparable city, sold for $4.5 million. You know, that's astonishing, 13 per foot. You know, you cannot tax your way out of this.
But I guess the question is though, taxes will, so we're clear, commercial taxes are going down in the city of Boston, in part driven by property values.
I'm talking about
in part because property values have dropped.
Well, let's talk about what's happening.
Correct?
One at a time, sir. Wait till the
Is
question.
that correct?
According to what we've heard, yes.
That's it. All right.
But I've yet to see it. And I would also point out that the mayor said that homeowners wouldn't be affected. But the day after the city council voted in lockstep as ideologues for the progressive mayor, that everybody in my neighborhood got a letter saying, hey, we're going to assess your house again. And some people got a 30% jump in their assessment. And that's the difference between sending your kid to a soccer league or sending your kid to the hockey league. This can't be sustained. We need cuts.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Lou Murray. Oh, sorry. Again with this. Sorry about that. Next, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Next, we have a panel. Mass Senior Action Council. We've got Lily Bryan, Sherry Peterson, Adonika Chaplin, Gwendolyn Mitchell, and Carolyn Villers. Welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, committee. My name is Lily Bryan, and I'm a homeowner in Dorchester for over 40 years. My husband and I purchased our home in 1979, where we raised our children and grandchildren. Our children have since moved out and bought their own home in the city of Boston area. My husband is no longer with us, which leaves me struggling to keep my home afloat. I am here today to speak to others on behalf of the seniors, asking you to pass the rule petition to stop the tax increase. With the rising costs in the Boston area, we cannot afford this 28% tax increase. Just a few weeks ago, I received a $300 increase in my homeowner's insurance policy. I called the bank to take care of the matter. In reviewing my policy, I was found out that I was $180,000 underinsured, which cost me an extra $500 for my yearly homeowner policy. Living on a fixed income has become a very burden to me and other seniors alike. I am asking you today to please support us in passing the 5099 petition. Time is running out. Please help us in taking care of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Sherry Peterson. I bought my home in 1977. The value was really low because the price was low. It is now valued at over $900,000. So the assessed value is a hardship because it means higher taxes, as you all know, and it also means higher insurance. I'm asking on behalf of Mass Senior Action, all seniors, and also all Boston homeowners. I've spoken to a lot of younger ones, and they said this is going to be a burden for them also. Please consider passing House Rule 5099. Thank you.
Thank you, and no notes. Woo.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Adonica Chaplin. I'm a 78-year-old woman who was born and raised in the city of Boston, who resides in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. I bought my home in 1976, and at the time, I worried about losing my home because the mortgage was $203 a month. Today, I am a retired Boston police officer who retired on a disability pension after getting hurt. I live on a fixed income. And when I say it's fixed, it's fixed. When you live on a fixed income, you learn to steal from Peter to pay Paul all the time. At 78, I did not think I would have to live like this, and I am living like this. They say, oh, you have to pay taxes. Well, I want to live in my home. I wish I could have my home declared a cemetery so I could know if I'm buried there, my children wouldn't have to pay taxes. I feel the bill 5099 is something. Why should they go to me, who my mother fought, her mother fought before her? Why am I fighting the same fight to hold on to what I have? I will never be a millionaire. I will never have more than what I have, because even if I could get a job, who would hire a 78-year-old woman? They'd be afraid of me falling and suing them. We need relief. My heat is kept on 64. When you come to my house, I tell you don't take your coat off. If you're gonna get cold, bring an extra sweater. So I feel it's time that we really, really need relief. We can't go to the grocery store. We go to the grocery store, eggs that used to be 99 cents for a dozen is $7.99 for a dozen. Go buy a milk. You can't buy a quart of milk. You have to buy a gallon of milk because a quart of milk is a little over what a half a gallon costs.
All good points. Thank you. The time
Okay,
is telling
thank
me
you.
we're done, but I'm going to, since this lady's right here, give you some extra time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us here today. We really appreciate it. My name is Gwen Mitchell, and I live in the Grove Hall area. I returned to my family house in the 1980s. With my father's GI Bill, this three-family home was purchased in the 1950s. His commitment was to always have a home for our family. We started with two sisters, my mother and her sister's family, and a mother-in-law apartment. Various family members have returned and remained. The scenarios have changed with life. Children became working adults, then became caretakers of their parents while raising their own children. The working adults became elders, retired, and then they began to help with raising grandchildren. Maintaining this family home is our responsibility to our father's legacy. Living on a fixed income and working to make ends meet is a daily challenge, and this gets harder and harder. Construction of affordable housing has been happening all around us. The value of these new houses are close to $1 million, therefore increasing the value of our neighborhood and houses. Our 100-plus year homes are taxed higher despite the fact that they are not worth $1 million, and repairs can be tripled due to the ancient equipment that exists. We must fight not to be taxed out of our homes. Gentrification definition, the process whereby the character of a poor urban area changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. Displacement of a long-term resident, particularly low-income families and individuals. Loss of a community and social networks. These definitions seem to be relevant to what we are facing right now. Mayor Wu's House petition number 5099 would be the beginning of proving me wrong. Please do the right thing to protect the baby boomers to live their lives in dignity, as we have already contributed so much to the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the panel? Thank you. The next panel is Chaton Green, Darlene Lumbos, Carlos Armayo, Eric Berg, Tiger Stockbridge. The last three of which are virtual. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Chairs Moran and Cusack and members of the Joint Committee on Revenue. My name is Darlene Lombos, and I am the president of the Greater Boston Labor Council. And on behalf of 100,000 union members and their families, we are here today to support the Boston property tax classification proposal before you. As a labor organization who represents workers who live and work in the city of Boston, the Labor Council stands with Mayor Wu as she fights for a Boston where working people can afford to put down roots, raise their families, and plan for tomorrow. Our members are homeowners and renters. They are working class residents and seniors with limited fixed incomes. We represent the fabric of our communities, the workers who keep Boston running, and the seniors who built this city. People like Lily Bryan, who you already heard from today, I just want to highlight that she bought her home in Dorchester with her husband of 45 years in 1979. For them, it was a little part of American dream, a place to raise their family and grow old. Now, a widow at age 77, Lily Bryan lays awake at night worrying about what she could lose if her property taxes go up. A tax increase would have far-reaching effects, including on Boston's middle-class residents. Like Dan Moriarty, a Boston resident and 20-year mechanic with the JP Police. He lives in Mattapan with his wife, a Boston public school teacher, and 4 kids. Even with 2 good incomes, they find it doesn't stretch far enough and are worried about the impact a property tax hike would have on their family. He told the GBLC that his oldest 2 kids are in their 20s, but they still live at home with them because the rent is too high and they can't support themselves without his help. An increase in their property taxes would make everything tighter for their family and even harder for their adult kids to get ahead. We deserve to stay in our homes, and we believe that Mayor Wu's proposal finds a balance to protect many from displacement. This proposal offers a critical tool to help Boston residents thrive by staying in their homes and communities, despite a shifting commercial property landscape, and it represents the interests of all stakeholders. We urge you to rule this legislation favorably out of committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Moran, Chair Cusack, and members of the Joint Committee. My name is Eric Berg. I'm the president of the Boston Teachers Union, 25-year elementary school teacher and a resident of the city of Boston, where I've lived for over 30 years and where my wife and I raised our 2 kids and sent them to public school. I'm here today on behalf of the BTU to support the tax reclassification home rule petition H5099. The BTU represents over 8,000 active members and over 3,000 retired members. And we support this petition because it would prevent sudden and dramatic property tax increases for homeowners in the city of Boston, allow retirees and seniors to remain in their homes, allow city employees to live in the city that they serve and love, to prevent the loss of more students and families from our schools, as well as decrease the financial burdens placed on renters. As you may know, student enrollment in Boston Public Schools is declining, largely because working families cannot afford to live in our city. Passing this bill would provide some measure of relief from the rising cost of living and would strengthen enrollment in our public schools. At the same time, it will contribute to stability among school staff who can afford to live in Boston. We suffer from a huge amount of staff churn, often caused by younger educators who are forced to leave Boston because housing is unaffordable. This bill could allow Boston to retain more teachers and improve student learning outcomes. We represent thousands of BTU retired educators who live on a fixed income, and with a very limited annual increase in their pensions and a reduction in their Social Security income due to federal law, a dramatic increase in property taxes will create yet another financial hardship on them, decreasing their ability to age in place. These retired members who served our schools and city for decades would be priced out of their homes if we do not implement the reforms in this bill, and that is an injustice we need to avoid. Given that home prices continue to skyrocket in Boston, while commercial real estate prices are declining, even if the rates are allowed to shift, as you've heard, the actual amount that would be paid by commercial property owners would not go up, but would simply go down by less. Housing insecurity continues to be one of the largest challenges facing the families our members serve every day. We, as representatives of 11,000 plus educators who serve tens of thousands of young Bostonians and their families every day, stand in support of H5099, proposed by Mayor Wu, approved by the City Council, and we urge you all to report it out favorably. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green, your colleagues have used up the time, but I will, since you came in, I appreciate you can
Sure.
take an extra minute, please.
All right, I'll be fairly quick. My name is Shaitan Green, born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm an agent of the Boston Building Trades Unions. We represent over 75,000 members across the state, along with tens of thousands who are retirees. Today I speak in support of House Bill 5099, which aims to provide much-needed relief to Boston residents and senior citizens. Many senior citizens and retirees, like has been mentioned, lived on fixed incomes, making them particularly vulnerable to rising costs of living. The proposal provides a modest tax adjustment that can help ease their financial burden, allowing them to allocate more of their limited resources towards essential needs such as healthcare, housing, and daily expenses. I sat next to a lovely 90-year-old woman who said, "My income doesn't go up." In fact, she stated that she still has to work. Who is lifting up the voices of people and seniors in this room and in our city and state? What happens when accounts go into negative because of necessities like home insurance and property tax? Being raised by my grandmother, who also raised many of my siblings and cousins, who relied solely on her support for everyday needs. Although she made life great by keeping the family together and a roof over our heads, we still struggle to make ends meet. Supporting House Bill 5099 to me is supporting my grandmother and many other families who already carry heavy loads. I knew what it was like to have the lights cut off or less groceries in the fridge. So this proposal not only speaks to me, but also other families who know what that experience feels like. My grandmother eventually passed down her house to me and other members of the family, allowing us to continue to grow roots and now raise our own children here. But sometimes it haunts me on just how close we were to losing what she worked so hard for. So today, we stand together to support this initiative and a fair, more equitable Boston, Mass and state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Are the virtual folks still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I'm still here.
Okay, could you take a minute each, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. My name is Carlos Aramayo. I'm the president of Unite Here, Local 26. We represent over 12,000 hospitality workers throughout the greater Boston area and in Rhode Island. Our organization actually recently bought an office building in downtown Boston, and we made this purchase because the streets are clean, the parks are beautiful, and the neighborhood is safe. Healthy city revenues guarantee that our neighborhood is attractive to investors and to citizens. And that is why we are strongly in support of H 5099. If city services lose funding, our city will become less attractive to potential office buyers and tenants. We believe we need to invest in our city. We also support this measure because working people should not bear the economic burdens of the COVID-19 pandemic. This measure ensures this burden is shared between residents and commercial owners with guardrails in place to protect both sides. We believe this is the best path forward to guaranteeing that Boston stay vibrant. We believe in Boston, we have invested in Boston, and with your support, Boston will continue to be the greatest city to plant roots and grow. We ask that you support this common sense measure so that we can continue to move forward as a city. Thank you for your consideration.
And thank you. Tiger?
Yes, Chairperson Moran, Chairperson Cusick, members of the committee, I appreciate you hearing us out. I'm in support of Bill 5099. In AFSCME, we represent over 1,800 city workers, most bound by residency laws. We have to live here. We have employees who have to live here. We have employees who own here. We have employees who rent here. But we do also have retirees who choose to stay here and want to stay here. The mayor's come up with a very phenomenal plan that's going to be able to work out these numbers. Every time I keep hearing all these different people on these things that say cuts, cuts, cuts. We clean your streets, we clean your parks. We do all these things that keep Boston moving. We keep the traffic moving. We fix the police cars. We can't afford any more cuts, and we're taking modest raises. I don't know who it was earlier that said that. We're taking 2.5% to 3%. That's a modest raise, not even keeping up with inflation. Our employees that have to stay here can't afford any more money put on their backs because their tax bills of their landlords are going to go up 30%. And that's not even saying for our employees who actually own properties in the city of Boston can't afford these tax hikes. I beg of you guys to please pass this bill. This is important, not just to us as city employees, the different seniors that we have here. This is a very important issue to all of us, and we ask that you support this bill and you pass it through with no problems. Please, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Thank you so
Next,
much.
we have Greg Maynard.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, thanks so much for having me in. It's my first time testifying before the State House, so it's very, very exciting for me. So, dear Chair Cusack, Moran, and members of the Massachusetts Joint Committee on Revenue, my name is Gregory Maynard. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Boston Policy Institute, a policy-focused nonprofit organization. I'm going to talk about a couple of reports and other information, and folks can find that at our website, bostonpolicyinstitute.org. In this testimony, I will refer to a report BPI released in February 2024 titled The Fiscal Fallout of Boston's Empty Offices, which found that Boston faces a $1.5 billion commercial property tax shortfall over the next 5 years due to falling office values. I will also discuss what the conclusions of that report say about Boston's home rule petition. Here's the headline. This home rule petition provides temporary relief for homeowners while doing nothing to address the budget crisis that Boston faces. Boston derives more than 70% of its revenue from property taxes, making it an extreme outlier among major American cities. BPI predicted, and now Boston's own assessing department has confirmed, that the decline in office values will shift an increasing share of the city's property tax burden onto residential property owners, including homeowners and apartment landlords. Boston's leaders are understandably concerned about asking residential property owners to shoulder a larger tax burden, and this legislation is the result of those concerns. They are right to be concerned. If this legislation is not passed, homeowners in Boston will face a 28% increase in their property taxes in the new year. Even if this legislation is passed, however, homeowners still face the threat of double-digit increases in their property tax bills. It simply delays those increases for a few years. This isn't a bold prediction. It is what BPI's report, along with analyses from the Tax Policy Center, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and extensive reporting by commercial real estate experts all agree on. commercial property values will continue to fall. The clearest sign of this is from Boston's own assessing department. In October, they released new projections showing that residential property values increased by 4%, while commercial property values declined by 7%. The last time Boston suffered a drop in value like this was during the Great Recession. The fact that this decline is happening while the broader economy continues to grow should be extremely alarming. These numbers lead BPI to believe that our projected $1.2 to $1.5 billion shortfall in commercial property tax revenue may be too optimistic. The 7% decline in commercial property values is almost half of the total decline BPI had projected for the entire 2024 to 2029 period. In real terms, this 7% nominal decline is closer to 10%. BPI had expected a total fall in commercial property values of 25% in real terms over 5 years. Put simply, Boston's commercial property values are dropping much faster than BPI predicted back in February, and there is substantial evidence to suggest that they will continue to fall. This home rule petition is not a long-term solution for anyone hoping to shield Boston's homeowners from rapidly increasing property taxes. Boston's budget crisis is complex and decades in the making. Addressing it requires a much broader, more data-driven conversation than has occurred thus far.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who has questions? I do. So what do you suggest?
So what we suggest is that the city take this more seriously than it has so far. What we've heard from, we agree with the sentiments that everyone has expressed that a big bump in property taxes would be bad for homeowners. The problem is that the city has expressed that it is going to continue to raise taxes to the levy, and that it thinks that raising taxes to the levy to the maximum allowed by Prop 2.5 is the only way to ensure that the city maintains its credit rating and is able to meet its obligations for city services. And so if that's the case, right, if the city is insisting that it will continue to raise taxes under Prop 2.5, but it also doesn't want to raise taxes like this, then we need to figure out what the solution is here. And this temporary shift of commercial taxes is just, not a long-term solution. Like, we have Boston is running into real problems because of its constraints under Prop 2.5.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. The next panel for 5-minute testimony together is Shirley Jones, Larry Costello, and Simon Pungratz. I think he wanted the rose between two thorns, as they say. Who's going to speak first?
Hello, my name is Larry Costello. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Larry Costello, and I've lived in West Roxbury, the West Roxbury section of Boston, for 65 years. I was appointed to the West Roxbury Neighborhood Council by Mayor Ray Flynn in August of 1992, and I've been on it ever since. I believe that the act relative to the property tax classification in the city of Boston is the right thing to do. Although a shift of the property tax levy will occur from commercial to residential, a sudden and dramatic tax increase will catch many residents off guard and will be a significant hardship for them. When Mayor Menino implemented a similar proposal in 2004, commercial real estate interests were not happy at that time. But commercial real estate did nothing but boom in the ensuing decade. We have seen a short-term dip in commercial real estate values, but we are already seeing recovery from the pandemic, which is the root cause here. A KPMG survey mentioned in today's Boston Globe says that 79% of U.S. chief executives believe office work is on the way back. And this legislation is about Boston, not Rochester or Baltimore. The mayor touched on how workers are back in the city. Boston is ahead of that curve. BPX, one of the largest commercial property owners, which has 51 properties in their Boston portfolio with 16.6 million square feet. These include well-known office buildings like 100 Federal Street, 200 Clarendon, the Prudential Center, and Atlantic Wharf. They released third quarter results on October 29th. They call out the Central Business District, or CBD, data in their reporting. The Boston Central Business District, as of September 30th, 2024, the occupancy percentage is 96%. The leased percentage is 97%. The difference is that the lease percentage includes signed leases for vacant space with future commencement dates. My point is that Boston is well along the way to recovery. Boston's 96% central business district occupancy compares to 85% in Los Angeles, 89% in New York City, 84% in San Francisco, and 80% in Seattle. Also, in case you're wondering, revenue for that quarter was up 4.2% to $859 million, and net income was $84 million. That's $84 million in the quarter. The other point I'd like to make is that economic changes are best introduced gradually. In 2022, the Fed interest rate was 0.25%. The Fed realized they needed to raise rates to fight inflation. Did they raise rates suddenly to 5.5%? No. They raised it 0.25 to 0.5%. 2 months later, they raised it another 0.5 to 1%. They raised it 9 times over the next 2 years to 5.5%. The changes took place gradually over time to allow people and institutions to adapt. The more gradual shift of the Boston tax, the more gradual shift in this current proposal, in this new updated home rule petition, will enable people to avoid the shock factor and give them more time to adjust to their higher tax burden. This is particularly true of the elderly, of which there are 9,000 in West Roxbury alone. I applaud the city and the business community for working together to reach the compromise which the current bill represents. Neither side got everything they wanted, but it's good to see the compromise is still possible in today's environment. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Chair Cusack, Chair Moran, and others on the committee, thank you for having this hearing today. My name is Simon Pongratz. I'm a resident of South Boston, and I'm testifying in support of House Bill 5099. I believe this home rule petition filed by Mayor Wu is a common sense compromise proposal that would protect both residents and businesses from dramatic swings in their property taxes and create stability in our tax system, especially as we move forward to a more uncertain economy with the new administration moving into our nation's capital in January. Without this legislation, I could see an increase of up to 30% in my property taxes between the October and January bills. In this time of rising costs and higher winter utility bills, the magnitude of an added expense is one that many of us can ill afford. This bill also creates protections for the city's small businesses, which may also be adversely affected by this shift. I would like to thank Mayor Wu and all of our local and state officials for their attention to this matter and for all their hard work in crafting this compromise to get this done for Boston's residents. Thank you for the consideration of my testimony. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us to be here. And I am, first off, going to start by saying I'm totally pleading to you from the bottom of my heart. I live in Dorchester. I'm a senior citizen in Dorchester. Living in Dorchester for me is a beautiful place to be. I would love to stay in my beautiful home, which I've just received my 1858 Dorchester historical plaque. I was so thrilled to get that plaque. And I would love to be able to stay there to watch that plaque on a daily basis. As I age, I want to age in place. I'm on a fixed income, and I too want Peter to pay Paul. But I need you to please consider passing the H5099 bill. And you think about this bill, what it means to a senior citizen like myself, who has worked all my life, who lives alone and love living alone, and I want to stay there. I totally cannot see me living anywhere else. I will never think about moving anywhere else. And by this tax bill, it would help me to keep my costs down so I don't have to worry about the expenses. It is too high. I did hear someone testify about the insurance rate. I said, ouch. I too got a bill from my insurance company it increased over $500 a month. So now I have to come up with that additional $500 a month because I want to stay where I'm at. I don't want to move. And the taxes, I can't afford to put another serious increase. Then what would I do? Am I supposed to, at that point, find any local food pantry? What do I do? But please consider a senior citizen, worked hard all her life, who is since on a fixed income now, and I just want to stay in Dorchester. I love Dorchester. I'm the current president of our Meeting House Hill Civic. And being the president of the Civic, it allows me to interact with all of my neighbors in my community. I'm also a board member of our main streets. That means I see our businesses, I mean, we're doing well on our main street. We take care of each other. I don't see anybody thinking we're going to go under.
Sounds like they picked the right person. Are there questions from the committee? No? No. Thank you very much, panel.
Thank you.
Next, we have Heather Harris on virtual. Ms. Harris, are you there? Heather, it's your turn to start. Pardon? Okay, we'll come back. Tana Preston. Tana Preston. Go right ahead, you're on mute. See if you can get off mute, if you can. Can we help her get off mute? Can we help her?
I'm trying to unmute.
Oh, you did it. You did it.
Oh, beautiful.
Okay, go right
Okay.
ahead. Good job.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Tiana Preston, and as others have said, I'm a retired school teacher. We bought this home the year my husband graduated from college, and now he's gone on ahead of me, and I would love to stay in my home. I just have a few facts. Boston taxpayers are burdened with the second highest real estate property values in the country. Boston taxpayers are burdened with taxes while billions of dollars are not collected from nonprofits and academia who pay a mere $35 million in total. Although they pay this much, the fire, the Boston police, EMT serve their constituents and students. Cut the budget. The mayor raised the budget by 8%. The misinformation that 1% is the cost of the planning department has been debunked. The BDPA agreed to transfer the funds. What else is not accurate? Boston must absorb the BPDA. Taxpayers suffer with no planning and no valid community engagement. Boston can and must abandon the private taking of White Stadium at a cost of $50 million to the city and paying to the surrounding communities. This is part of the Frederick Law Olmsted plan for the city of Boston, and it was given for the use of students in the Boston public schools. Please stop making unilateral top-down decisions against the will of the community. If the mayor must cut the superfluous staff of the over 20,000 City of Boston employees. There are many ways to cut this budget. The alternative is what got Boston into this economic, social, transportation, traffic, environmental cluster. We still want to expand the tree canopy, not destroy our current trees. We want to not build only low-income, segregated public housing with inadequate outdoor space. And we want to abolish the BPDA to have a smart development plan that is planned, needed, and actually has community involvement. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. This would cost me, and we raised our 4 children and sent them off to college and the service. And my PD, my youngest son, who was a Marine, is suffering with a depression disorder, and he lives with me. He's 100% disabled, but he wanted to serve his country as his uncles and had served. I am sincerely asking the city of Boston to rethink what they've done.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, well studied, and thank you for your service, both your son and your family. Anybody, questions? Thank you, ma'am. Looking for Heather Harris still on virtual, I understand? No. Next, Diane Valley on virtual. No. Oh. Yeah, that's. Is there anyone else we went by who's now here, or is there anyone else who would like to testify? Seeing none? Oh, wait, did I miss someone? Oh, ma'am. Come up.
I'm going to be brief. It's very simple. I'll be 92 years old in March.
What's your name, ma'am?
For my health and strength. My name is Julia Walker. I live in Dorchester. I've had to go back to work. Thank God for my health. I'm able to, because I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to be homeless. I work too hard. My husband's been dead for 15 years, so it's all been on me. But I just don't feel like that. From all as seniors we went through to get our homes. I raised 7 kids, and 5 of them are still living. But I just feel like, you know, what if I wasn't able to work 2 days? I have to go to work tomorrow because they raised my house, the value of it went up, whether I wanted to or not. It's out of my control. But so I have to prepare to either be able to pay. I don't want to lose my house because I can't pay the taxes, or the electric bill, the cost of living. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Any questions? I understand Aletta is on virtual. Aletta, now's your opportunity. Go right ahead. Aletta, this is your time to testify. We're not hearing anything. Yeah. Send it to us in writing today if you could, please, because you're not coming across on the Teams. Is there anything else? Okay, with that, I will take a motion.
Make a motion to close today's hearing.
Thank you. All those in favor? Yes, thank you. The hearing is closed today. Thank you.
There you go.